Director at the Women's Summit. At the controls tonight, we have the Fearless Networker with us, Derek Calhoun. Great to see my teammate here again, and our Tech Group Women's Summit leader, Rosemarie Savino. Thank you, Rosemarie. Welcome to day 4 of the Women's Summit experience. Only 6 more days to go. Really? Tonight is brought to you by the letter E in experience for elections and economy. So tonight we have the Virginia Campaign for a Family-Friendly Economy. They're our sponsor, and they're also hosting tonight's session. And tonight's session is Winning Essential Rights for Essential Non-Essential Workers. So tonight's panel is moderated by Tara Gibson, and with her is her teammate Carter Bell. Welcome, Carter. Great to see you. Tara Gibson is a champion for women and working families. She has been organizing in Virginia since Obama 2008 campaign. Good for you. As director of the Campaign for the Family-Friendly Economy, Tara is working hard to build momentum for policies that help Virginians make ends meet and be there for their families when they need to be. Welcome, Tara. I will hand the mic over to you and your expert panel to discuss this wonderful subject matter tonight. So welcome.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you to the organizers of the Women's Summit for working with us and having us put this great panel together. Good evening to all of you, and thank you for joining us. My name is Tara Gibson, and as Catherine said, I serve as director for the Virginia Campaign for a Family-Friendly Economy. Our organization firmly believes that our economy works best when everyone has access to the tools they need to build a better future. Paid family and medical leave is a primary way we can ensure hardworking families don't have to make an impossible choice between their family's health and financial security. So in my role with the campaign, I've talked to countless people who have found paid leave to be a lifeline when they needed it most. Unfortunately, I've also talked to many Virginians whose families suffered because they did not have paid leave. Last year, for example, I met a woman named Rebecca who lives in Norfolk. She gave birth to her first child while she was living in New Jersey, a state that has a paid leave program in place, and this allowed her to take time from work to care for and bond with her newborn. Then she moved to Virginia, where obviously we don't have a paid leave program. Rebecca gave birth to her 2 younger children here. She considers herself to be lucky to have had employers who worked with her to ensure that she could care for her young children, but she wasn't able to stay home and dedicate all of her time to caring for her newborn and her growing family the way she did in New Jersey. And so she knows that many parents in Virginia don't have employers who are willing to work with them to at least provide a little bit of leave like hers did. As our economy begins to reopen, paid leave is also critical to mitigate the spread of coronavirus and ensure a healthy, financially stable workforce. Many of the frontline workers in the pandemic response have had no paid leave or paid sick days, putting them in an awful position as businesses reopen. And as our country engages in long overdue discussions about how we can dismantle a systemic racism, policies like paid leave can help ensure all families are able to care for themselves and their loved ones. This is why I am proud to lead this panel today about how we can win paid leave for all working people in Virginia. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. We want to hear from you. Please say hello in the chat box and feel free to drop any questions you may have for the panel in there anytime. I will ask a couple questions as we get started, but we will definitely come back to your questions towards the end of the conversation. And as we kick things off today, I want to share a special message from Senator Elizabeth Warren on behalf of our campaign.
Hello, Virginia Women's Summit. I sure wish we could be together to celebrate your courage and your advocacy, but I'm afraid that's just not possible right now. Over the past few years, Network Nova has been fighting tirelessly to build a better Virginia. You've organized, you've made phone calls, you've knocked on doors in order to flip Virginia blue. And after you elected new leaders who promised to prioritize progressive policies, you stayed in the fight and held them accountable. You were there every step of the way during the legislative session to make sure that they passed policies like the Equal Rights Amendment, rollbacks on unnecessary restrictions on reproductive health care, and gun safety legislation. Your work proves what I've always known. You don't get what you don't fight for. My friends at the Campaign for a Family-Friendly Economy know that firsthand. They've been working tirelessly to pass policies like paid family and medical leave and affordable child care in Virginia so that working families never have to choose between their health and their next paycheck. And at a time when communities of color are being disproportionately affected by COVID-19, we need more diverse voices in office, now more than ever, making the decisions that affect their communities. State and local elections are going to be critical to our response to this crisis. So if you're thinking about running, don't let this crisis deter you. We need you in this fight. And if you're not running, please support someone who is. Volunteer your digital skills with some candidate who's had to go 100% remote. Pitch in $5. Staying safe does not mean staying silent. I am so proud to stand alongside Campaign for a Family-Friendly Economy in Virginia, and I hope you'll join me in that fight by texting Virginia to 474747. We face an uphill battle, but I am confident that if we stand together, if we fight together, if we persist together, we will make it through this crisis and come out stronger on the other side. Thank you.
Yay! Not a bad messenger. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists tonight. We have with us tonight Senator Jennifer Boysko, who has been a member of the Virginia Senate since 2019. Prior to serving in the state Senate, she was a member of the House of Delegates. Senator Boysko has spent her career working for social justice and economic equity and has sponsored the Senate version of the paid family legislation to create a program here in Virginia. Welcome, Senator Boysko. We also have with us tonight Senator Jennifer McClellan, who has represented the Greater Richmond area for 11 years in the House of Delegates and has been a member of the Virginia Senate for 4 years. Senator McClellan also serves as vice chair of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. As the first House member to be pregnant while in office, she has been a fierce protector of women's rights, children, and families. She lives in Richmond with her husband and 2 kids. We also welcome Senator McClellan. We also have with us tonight Delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy. Delegate Carroll Foy has dedicated her life to serving others. During her time in the legislature, Jennifer led Virginia's effort to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, passed legislation to help combat Virginia's teacher shortage, and proudly supported the successful fight to expand Medicaid to 400,000 Virginians. She is a proud mother of twin 2-year-olds and wife to her husband, Jeff, who she met her first week at VMI. Welcome, Delegate Carroll Foy. We have with us Shilpa Phadke. She is the Vice President of the Women's Initiative at American Progress. She oversees American Progress's policy development and analysis, as well as its advocacy and outreach work on women's issues. Prior to joining American Progress, Phadke served in the Obama White House as a special assistant to the president for cabinet affairs. In that role, she managed the relationship between the White House and more than 12 economic, domestic, and international agencies in order to advance the administration's policy, communications, regulatory, and program implementation priorities. Welcome, Shilpa. And last but not least, Dr. Paige Perriello is a physician with the Pediatric Associates of Charlottesville, where she grew up. She serves on the board of the Virginia chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics and is on the steering committee for the Greater Charlottesville Trauma Informed Community Network. She is focused on health inequities as well as mitigating the impact of childhood trauma. She enjoys seeing the second, third, and fourth generation of patients that her father cared for as a doctor in Charlottesville. Dr. Perriello and her husband live in Charlottesville, obviously, and have 3 daughters. So welcome, Dr. Perriello. Our first question tonight that I want to get started with in talking about this fight for paid family and medical leave, I want to know what inspired you to join the fight for paid family and medical leave. So I want to start first with Senator Boysko, our champion and patron in the Senate for our bill for paid leave. Senator Boysko.
Yeah, thank you, Tara. It's really fun to be here with you all tonight. This is such an important issue, and I think we're really seeing the importance right now during the COVID-19 pandemic with people. I know that in my office, I'm dealing with families who are truly suffering through this. But I want to tell you, so I was inspired to work on this personally. It's very unusual that we actually have 3 members of the General Assembly who had premature babies, and I'm one of them. The other 2 I know are right here, the other 2 Jennifers. But when we had our baby, she was born 2 months early. My husband and I were living on his paycheck alone. We did not have the bandwidth or the ability to, it was month to month at that time. And he had to go back to work. I couldn't drive. I had a baby in the NIC unit 20 miles away from my home and a toddler at home, no family around. And we struggled through that. I've also talked to other family members who have dealt with cancer diagnoses, who have really had to make hard decisions about working right until the end of their lives, basically. These are issues that are going to happen whether or not we have legislation that can solve it. And this legislation sets up a framework so that we could be not only pragmatic and reasonable, but compassionate to everyday working families who are having to make these very difficult decisions between staying home with a loved one who might be at the end of their life, or caring for a new child who's coming in to our families, and especially when we have really difficult circumstances. But when I was approached to carry this legislation, it was a no-brainer, because anyone you talk to knows that this is reality for thousands and thousands of families every single day. And so I'm hopeful that, this is going to be the 3rd year that I will be championing this bill. And I think we're going to make great progress this year.
Thank you. Yes, I am very hopeful for the coming year. I also want to hand the same question over to Delegate Carol Foy, who I know has a really powerful story. What inspired you to join the fight for paid family and medical leave?
Yes, thank you for that. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you guys in such a wonderful panel. And so what made me want to champion paid family medical leave is, in 2017, I decided to run for House of Delegates. And I announced in January, and my husband and I became pregnant, of course, on Valentine's Day. And I ran my entire campaign while pregnant with not just 1, but 2 babies. And I didn't tell anyone, right? And I didn't tell people because I didn't want the questions of whether you should do this, whether you could do this, because I knew that pregnancy discrimination was real. And I did it anyway, despite the naysayers, despite the people who told me I should drop out, that did find out. It didn't matter, because I was running for a greater purpose. And so after being successful, I have to tell you that when my babies were born, they were born at 22 weeks. And for those of you who don't know, viability, meaning the point of time when a baby is actually determined to be able to live, is 24 weeks. So I had a conversation with my neonatologist, and he came in and he said this very cavalierly. He said, math is simple. You're at 22 weeks. These babies will be born today. Viability is 24 weeks. So this is what we can do for you. We can deliver these babies, wrap them up in a blanket, and hand them to you so you and your husband can hold them and watch them as they pass away. And that's the best we can do. And I remember looking at my husband, and if he would have blinked, like a tear would have fallen. So I looked at him and was like, okay, you're going to be no help whatsoever. And I remember looking at the doctor, and I remember saying, you know, they're here for a purpose. And it won't be you who decide whether or not they make it, right? It'll be God who decides if they make it. And I'm blessed enough to be their mom, and I want heroic efforts to ensure that we walk out of this hospital. Now, maybe 1 or 2 threats were made, such as if my babies don't walk out, none of you will be walking out of here, but whatever. But I also remember after that having 2 babies who ended up being healthy. But one of the things that I also didn't know was going to happen is that I would immediately have to be hauled back to work, because we don't have paid family sick days or paid family medical leave here in Virginia, or paid sick days. And so I had to leave my premature twins in the NICU at a time when they needed me the most, because we don't have something as simple as this for women throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that is not fair. It is not just. We wonder why women have to leave the workforce, and why women aren't really paid what they're worth, because they have these segments in time where they have to decide between their children and their family and their career and their jobs. And that is unconscionable. So I carry paid family medical leave because it is beyond time for us to give women the tools that they need to successfully have a career and raise a family at the same time, and be there for their loved ones, like new children and their loved ones who become sick, or when they become sick themselves. I mean, these are basic things that we can do to improve the status here of women. And when we do that, women and families can actually reach their full potential and possibilities. And that is why I championed the paid family medical leave on the House side. And I was honored to do that. And I look forward to doing it again.
Thank you. So one more person who I think would be good to answer this also. I think it's really fascinating that all 3 of the Jennifers have had preemie babies and have experienced the need for this. So I want to go to Senator McClellan to answer this question as to what inspired you to join the fight for paid family and medical leave.
Well, thanks, Tara, and thanks everybody for having us. I think what you're hearing is the importance of having diverse perspectives in the General Assembly, because I was the first House member to be pregnant and have a baby and have to go through this in the House. And my second child was a preemie, but that's not the story I'm going to tell, because it's fairly similar to the ones you've heard. But this, the need for paid family leave occurs at all stages of life, and particularly for those of us who are in the sandwich generation. So I remember when my son was just before his 3rd birthday, we were at a hotel. I was curling my hair, and in the blink of an eye, he pulled on my arm and he burned his hand on my curling iron. And after a 3-hour ambulance ride back to Richmond, after him getting treatment, we were in the burn unit for a full week. And I hit the boss and the job lottery, because I had a job where it didn't matter where I was. It was mostly email and conference calls. But I also had a boss who said, you need to be there taking care of him. But my husband didn't. My husband, ironically, was working at the Democratic National Committee, the party that championed the original Family Medical Leave Act. And yet, when he told his boss, like, I'm going to have to be home to help Jen take care of our son, because yes, it was a week in the hospital, but he had a 6-week recovery at home where I had to do burn care. And his boss said, well, isn't your wife taking care of that? which when I heard that, I was livid. Now, at the same time, at the same hospital where my son was recovering, my father was in rehab, recovering from a bleeding brain tumor because he was in stage 4 kidney cancer. And that experience showed me that, yes, it's important that you need to have paid family leave at the beginning of life and recovering from childbirth and bonding with your child. But you also need it at the end of life, and more importantly, when you're the caregiver in the middle. This was so important to me that when my legislative aide became pregnant, and the state only gives 6 weeks of paid leave, I paid for the rest. I remembered what it was like trying to recover and bond with my babies. And so I paid the extra 6 months so that she could have a full 12 months out of my pocket. And yet again, she won the boss lottery. Not everyone does. And I think about, the title of this is about essential workers. I think about domestic workers who by law were excluded from every worker protection, including unemployment compensation. And so when they get sick or when they have a family member who needs their help, not only do they not have paid family leave, and they literally have to choose between their job and taking care of their family or their own health, but if they choose to leave work, they don't get unemployment compensation. Now, we're working to fix that too with the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights, but that is why this is so important. But again, what's important is now, after 400 years of General Assembly history, you have people who have these experiences, who are policymakers, who can say, it's not just my experience. I am a voice for millions and millions and millions of other Virginians who face these decisions and these difficulties every day.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. We often hear about the need for paid family and medical leave when it comes to particularly maternity time off and maternity care. But I think we also need to talk about the importance of needing time off for caring for yourself and also caring for the loved ones around you. So really quick before we go to this next question, I want to put up a poll question. What percentage of people aren't even eligible for unpaid leave in Virginia? I'm going to vote too. So we'll let the answers roll in. And I saw somebody in the chat comment talk about COVID. So I want to ask Shilpa and Dr. Perriello, what implications does the COVID-19 pandemic have on the push for paid leave? So I'll start with Shilpa.
Yeah, and it's so great to be with you and see so many friends, and I'm happy to be here. So, not surprising, as the coronavirus, started to hit America, we have no national paid sick days policy, and we have no national paid family leave policy. So we had 33 million workers in this country that didn't have access to a single paid sick day. And, not only something like 80% that didn't have access to paid family and medical leave. So we weren't prepared at the onset, really, to deal with the crisis that we had. And I think it really exposed the vulnerability that we all have, and how we're so connected. As we think about paid leave and the stories you just told, so often it's about my friend is sick or my mom is sick. But that wellness that you have or your family has doesn't translate into, the overall public health of our country in such a dramatic way as it did with COVID. And so all of a sudden, your health and the health of your family is so clearly dependent on the health of your neighbors or your grocery store clerk or your doctor. And so I think one of the things that COVID really laid bare is how unprepared we were and how connected we all are. And so to me, that's even more glaring. We were able to act at the federal level and get some pieces across the finish line, but almost 100 million workers still have nothing. Even in this crisis, we couldn't get, the strongest policy over the finish line. Like, it took a global pandemic to get the first national emergency paid sick days policy and paid leave policy. that it's not good enough. And so we have to keep fighting for it. So I think, that those are two of the pieces, just the urgent need that we had, how connected we all are. And then I guess two other pieces I would add is that there is broad support for this policy, broad and deep support among Republicans, independents, moderates. This is not a policy that we need to be on the defense. Like, we feel, there's tons of polling, and I'm happy to share it, but we can, flip the switch here and be really on the offense for it. The public is with us, even if the really loud corporate lobbyists aren't. So we have an opportunity to fight for the really big thing, and we shouldn't be scared of it because the public is with us. And I think COVID really, helped educate people on sort of the fragility that families have and the fragility of their economic situation and of public health.
Thank you, Shilpa. And I'll kick it over to Dr. Perriello. I just want to keep calling you Paige. Dr. Perriello.
Paige would be perfectly fine. Thank you all so much. It's really an honor to be here with everybody. And Shilpa really expressed a lot of the things that I wanted to share. And I think what COVID-19 has done is sort of taken paid family leave from each of these powerful stories we just heard from our senators and delegate, and broadened it to everybody understanding. And it's not just an individual and a family issue, it's a community issue, because you're only as healthy as your neighbor is. And I think a lot of people had to experience that for the first time. So in my office with my patients, as we got into the beginning of March, and many of the parents of my patients were coming home with their laptops and their files to sort of telecommute and work for however long it was going to be, while also homeschooling their children. Many of my patients' families were essential workers, were walking right back out the door to go to work. Those parents were predominantly Black and brown, predominantly women, and most of them don't have anything called a paid sick day. And so that makes the choice, as if it's not hard enough. Any of us who've been a primary caregiver for a child know there's nothing more terrifying than having a sick child. And when you're being asked to decide whether you can stay home with your sick child or put them in the care of somebody else when they're sickest and need you the most, that is a scenario I hear every day. I've heard that every day for the last 10 years in practice. And COVID has expanded that to people who maybe didn't have to experience that before. And when I ask those parents, can I write you a note? I'm happy to write you a note and say you were here, or try to excuse you from your job. They sort of drop their head and say, well, I can't afford that, because they're not going to be able to get paid. And then there's another level of not being able to take care of their child. And in terms of COVID, just one more example, I sat with a family about a month ago. The daughter was having an asthma attack, needed some treatment. She had a fever. We had decided to test her for COVID disease. And so I had a conversation with the dad, who was an essential worker, and told him that he was not going to be able to go to work until we at least had the results of the test back. That was kind of a minimum. And he was really angry at me. He was angry because he wasn't going to get paid if he didn't go to work. And for those people who never had to experience thinking about, well, what if the person who unloaded my groceries and my vegetables and put them out, and then I get them, what if they had a fever, but they took some Motrin and went on to work because they needed to go to work to get their paycheck? And all of a sudden, you can quarantine all you want, but if your neighbor isn't quarantined and your community members aren't quarantined, then it doesn't do you a whole lot of good. And so I've seen a lot of people increase their understanding of why having paid sick days and paid medical leave is sort of a low bar, and one we ought to be able to get to.
Yeah, from my end of the campaign, it seems that this pandemic has fast-tracked an understanding of the need for both paid sick and paid family and medical leave. So unfortunately, it took a pandemic, but there's a much deeper understanding. The next question that Paige started to talk about a little bit is talking about the racial disparities that she talked about the racial disparities that exist within this pandemic, but we also want to talk about that through the lens of paid family and medical leave. So the poll question here is, what's popping up? Women of color are 16% of the workforce, but over what percent of workers making minimum wage? So we'll let that go up. And then the question that I want to put to this panel, and I will start with Delegate Carol Foy, how is paid family and medical leave a racial justice issue?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So according to the National Partnership for Women and Families, 62% of Black adults and 73% of Latinx adults are either ineligible for or cannot afford to take unpaid leave, compared to 60% of white adults. So I think that says it in itself, how this is a racial issue. When you look at the majority of our frontline workers, the people who are jeopardizing their lives for all of our safety, the majority of them are women and people who are from Black and brown communities. And so when you're looking at why is there such a disparate number of Black and brown people who are contracting and dying from, for example, COVID-19 right now, you have to look back at that, and you look at the historical and systemic inequities in a lot of our systems. And one of it has to do with economic opportunity and a lack of telework, and most important, lack of paid family medical leave. Because now that you have so many people who have seen their last paycheck and don't know when their next one is coming, who couldn't use several days of paid family medical leave to care for themselves if they've tested positive for COVID-19, or if they need to take care of a loved one, or whatever may have you. And so that's the importance of having these type of job protections, where in Virginia, we were ranked dead last in the country for workers, behind Mississippi, behind DC, everyone, right? And that is one of the contributing reasons to that, is the fact that we don't have these simple job protections. We don't have these simple policies that we can implement to protect workers and their families. And so that is something that we can do to address it, to make Virginia not only the #1 place for businesses, but also one of the best places to live, work, and raise a family.
Yes. And we've seen it is possible to be #1 in both. I think Washington State is the example to look towards for that. So I'm going to point the same question over to Senator McClellan.
So I think we've got to go back in time for a minute, because this is really, as Delegate Carol Foy alluded to, baked in our system. So in the progressive era, when worker protections first started to be put in place, guess who was excluded? The people that were excluded were those who were primarily in those jobs that were solely for Black and eventually brown people. They were the ones that by law they could only get. So all of those worker protections, domestic workers, home care workers, shoe shines, newspaper boys, I could go on and on. They were excluded from the minimum wage. They were excluded from workers' comp. They were excluded from unemployment compensation. They were excluded from employment discrimination laws. Last year, we started to make an impact on that. And as a result, some of those minimum wage exemptions at least were lifted. This year, we lifted exemptions for home care workers and now domestic workers. But again, one of the reasons so many low-wage workers are predominantly Black and brown was because it was done that way by design nearly 100 years ago, and we're just now starting to unravel that. So it is no surprise then that these are the very workers who, when forced to make that decision between staying home and forgoing that paycheck, they don't have a choice. Because again, when you think about, you don't really plan for a lot of these instances. If it's an accident or even an illness, sometimes you can't plan for it. And the medical costs are huge. When my son burned his hand, total cost, that was $15,000. Again, I was lucky. I had health insurance that covered the bulk of it. But even if I didn't, and if I was in a low wage job, I would have been lost. I probably wouldn't have had health insurance either, because until we expanded Medicaid, most people didn't. They fell in that gap. So you have to look at the big picture and see how racial inequity that was baked into our systems plural, from the beginning, has led to inequities in healthcare, in economic opportunity, in the environment, in education, and they are all connected. Housing, all connected to that. The disparate impact didn't go away with a magic wand when those laws were repealed. We're still dealing with those impacts today.
Thank you. Does anyone else, any of the panelists, want to also add to this conversation? Trying to keep us on time, but I want to make sure I give everyone opportunity.
I can add really quickly. I mean, I think what the big takeaway for me is that, you know, we don't value in this country care, and we don't value the people that do the care and the people that do the care work. And the people that do the care work tend to be women of color. They're Black women, they're Latinas. And I think, you know, if you look right now, women of color are overrepresented in these low-wage jobs. They're on the front lines, and they're in industries that are hardest hit. You know, even as every month we look at these jobs numbers, you know, not everyone is talking about how Black women and Latinas are still really falling behind every month. And so while, you know, the country is opening up again, or, you know, different parts will start to reopen, understanding how these policies are so critical to like the economic piece of this, I think is a huge piece. But to like really do the shift, it's shifting this structural piece of how we value care, who gives it, who receives it. And to me, that's the big piece.
Thank you, Shilpa. So hopefully now everyone is feeling a little bit more fired up, and we want to see this pass here in Virginia. So to Senator Boysko, what can people do to get involved in the fight for paid leave?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So this has been something that we've been working on for several years. And I will tell you that when we go and present this before the committees that are making the decisions about whether it's going to move forward or not, quite often the business community comes forward and they wring their hands and they say, oh, this is just going to be too hard. We can't do this. I'm going to tell you, after watching what we've been able to accomplish with the unemployment insurance, where on a dime, within 3 months, we have been able to address 850,000 Virginians who needed unemployment insurance payments. Nobody can anymore say that this is going to be too difficult. So I think it's really imperative that we share our stories again. We don't take no for an answer. We continue to be you know, warriors on this with a smile on our faces, because every single person on that panel knows personally someone who has been impacted, needing to care for a loved one, whether it was the end of their life, whether it was their spouse or their child. They know that this is imperative. And in fact, in a bipartisan manner this past year, while the bill did not successfully make it through the General Assembly, we were able to get a study done that is looking at how implementation will take place. It's going on right now with the Virginia Employment Commission, and I'm very optimistic about it. But again, our stories, you know, especially those bringing in the folks who don't have that flexibility, quite often, again, what you hear from the legislators are, well, in my circle of, you know, people that I'm talking to, we work it out in our firm. We work it out. So if someone is having a trouble, we just, you know, move them forward. We need to remind them that everybody is not like them, that we have people who are disenfranchised, who don't have that flexibility, who have systematically been left to make those most difficult decisions. And we can't allow it anymore. And it's not only with paid family and medical leave, but it's sick days. It's with equal pay for equal work. It's with, you know, compensation overall. It's not too hard. I'm not going to take that as an excuse any longer. And I think that we all need to be reaching out to our individual members of the House of Delegates, senators, our federal congressional members, and making sure that we are united. This is something that everybody can benefit from, not just a small group of folks. This is something that every single person in Virginia can benefit from. And we need to just make sure that it's understood that this is a top priority for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I keep saying that the thing that we need to really focus on is creating that demand and making it a priority for all of our legislators in Richmond, but also obviously those in DC. Shilpa, can you talk about what we can do to also put pressure on the federal level?
Yeah, so I think as most people know, there's been several COVID packages that have passed. The House put out a very strong update that closes all those loopholes that exempt business and healthcare workers. And the United States Senate is doing nothing. I mean, they're just sitting there and watching like we're not in the middle of the pandemic. It is actually crazy. So we have to put pressure on the Senate to come back and act, and to, not forget about almost 100 million workers that have nothing. Especially, we know, we're still in this first wave. Who knows what the next year will look like? We know that the recovery time for COVID is much longer than the 14 days quarantine. People are going to need to take, significant time off. Not to mention all of us with kids at home and no summer camp, and who knows what the fall will look like. And there was some childcare leave in those packages, but it's limited, and it doesn't get you to a full salary. So I think really putting pressure on the Senate. For those of you that are interested, the Center for American Progress, along with a lot of national partners and state groups, have started a campaign called Paid Leave for All. You can go there, paidleaveforall.org, and you can learn more on the federal piece. But tell your story. For those of you that have leave, take it. We fought for it. Take it, use it. Tell your spouses to use it. We need the men to use it, so that we can, push back. And then most importantly, vote. I mean, we're never going to be able to change the outcomes unless we change the people that are legislating. So
I will also say that for here in Virginia, all of our House members in Virginia are all signed on to the Family Act, which is the federal paid leave bill that exists in Congress. So we are very excited to have all of our Virginia Democrats signed on to that.
And Chairman Scott has been, essential in pushing for this. And so a huge thank you for him. And, Tara, when you said fast track, I mean, it's taken a long time to get the states in this country that have paid leave across the finish line. Virginia is not the only state that does not have a policy, but we could be really close next year in terms of fast tracking paid sick days and paid family leave at the federal level. And it could come faster than, getting it through every, a state by state strategy. So while you all fight in Virginia, keep pushing the feds too.
Yes, Virginia could be the first Southern state to have paid family and medical leave. We like being first. That would be nice. Okay, so looking at time, so I'm going to do this last question for everyone. So we're going to go around the full panel here. What is the one thing you wish every Virginian knew about paid family and medical leave? And I'll start with Senator Boysko and then go to Delegate Carol Foy.
Thank you. So what I wish that everybody would understand is this is not impossible. For an average employee and an average employer, with someone around $60,000, you're talking about paying the process that we have been bringing forth is an insurance policy. You would put in about $5 a pay period. It would provide you you put in $5, your employer puts in $5 a pay period. And that, we have seen this around the country where they've done this in other states, is enough to create this fund that will be able to manage a paid family and medical leave program for all of the 8 million people who are here in Virginia. This is not rocket science. It's not out of reach. And so again, I'm going to say it again. Anybody who says this is too hard doesn't understand what we're talking about. So let's just keep having this conversation. And I'm so glad that we're here together tonight. Thanks, Tara.
Thank you, Senator. Delegate Carol Foy.
Yes, thank you. So I think one of the things that I would, want people to know is the fact that the United States is the only developed country without a national paid family leave policy. And that is absolutely absurd. And so when you put it in context, we are the wealthiest, most powerful country on the planet, and we don't have something as simple and basic as this. So paid family medical leave, it's good for the economy, it's good for families, it's good for Virginia, and it's something that we have to be uncompromising on, because if we really want women and families to reach their full possibilities and potential, then we have to have something like this in place so women can no longer be forced to make the decision between their jobs and their family. So thank you all for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, I since this pandemic has really started and all the lockdowns started, I just keep thinking, where would we be, particularly in Virginia, if we had passed this 3 years ago? You know, I feel like our workers would be in a much better place. Okay, let's go to Senator McClellan.
So we can do this, but we need your help. When we have people like you telling your stories, flooding your representatives, your senator and your delegates and at Congress, our phone lines, flooding our emails saying you want this, you want this, you want this, telling your personal story about why it's important, we can make it happen. That's how we got Medicaid expansion. That's how we got an increase in or an increase in the minimum wage. That's how we have made progress every single time, was because the people demanded it and the legislators had to listen. Telling your stories is critical. Senator Boysko is absolutely right. There are members of the General Assembly on both sides of the aisle who view this through their own personal experiences, but they do not, the diversity of the General Assembly by any measure, including life experience, does not reflect the diversity of the Commonwealth. And so they need to hear from you directly instances where you needed it and you didn't get it worked out. If you're a small business owner in particular, NFIB loves to come in and say that they're the voice for all small businesses and that they just can't do it. But there are small businesses that say, I need this to pass because I want to give paid family medical leave to my workers and I can't do it, but with this bill I can. So join us, and with you, we are going to win this fight.
Yes. Yes, and I have been in those Republican offices, and they have shared their stories with me. So yes. I know that they get it. Dr. Perriello?
I think there's been a lot of important conversation about telling our stories, and almost all of us have them. As a pediatrician, I'm in this sort of non-political sphere most of the time. And one of the most important things that I think all of us can do, and anybody who's tuned into this is on top of this issue and already knows how to write your delegate and senator. But one of the most important things that we can all do is listen to the stories of our neighbors and help elevate those stories. And I'm really fortunate enough to sit with families every day and hear their stories, and trying to help them understand how we can elevate their stories, because most of them don't even know that this is a possibility. So when you go back to the communities that you're in, and I know everything is sort of virtual and not natural right now, but you always have opportunities to listen, to ask questions, and to listen to your colleagues, to your neighbors' stories, and help figure out how to elevate those to the people who can make a difference.
I'm muted. Thank you so much, Dr. Perriello. Thank you for all that you do, all the work that you do in Charlottesville. And last but not least, Shilpa.
I think the big takeaway that I want to leave people with is the market's not going to fix it. There's a lot of people that say that the market will fix it. If business didn't step up and provide their workers with paid leave or paid sick days in a pandemic, like, it's not going to happen. There's a lot of business that wants to do the right thing. They should be rewarded. But, this isn't, we've tried for years to let the market, come up with a solution. It hasn't happened. There's a clear role for government here, and it's not impossible. We are a unique outlier in America. There are plenty of states that have passed this. And it's not on you. It's not on any individual because they can't figure it out. this is a structural problem and it needs a big structural solution.
Thank you. Well, we are at time, so I just want to thank this amazing badass group of panelists who joined us today. You're some of my favorite people who are working on this issue. So thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for joining us in this conversation, to take action and join our campaign and join us in this fight. I would encourage you to text 474747 as the lovely Senator Warren talked about in the video that kicked us off. Also, you can sign up on our campaign website and also follow along on Facebook and Twitter. And Carter is going to put all of these links up in the chat box for you to find. So I will hand it back over to the Women's Summit organizers to wrap it up and talk about what's next.
All right. Hello. Okay, I'm just waiting for.
That's my cue. Thank you. Thank you. That was really wonderful. Thank you to the Campaign for Family Friendly Economy for bringing this issue to the table. Thank you so much to the panelists for your hard work on this issue as well. And let's get it done. So I want to remind everyone to set their clocks for tomorrow. We have a pretty exciting day. And by the way, I know this calendar sometimes looks a little off, but it is Thursday tomorrow. Yes. Okay, and we have our Power Lunch Getting Real on Race. Join us for as we get real about racism and discuss how we can all play a part in destroying these and other isms. Mm-hmm. This session, based on NAACP's program, will convene a powerhouse group of women leaders: Karen Boynton Towns, NAACP, Marjorie Bella Cruz, community leader, Melvina Wilson, Center for Advocacy and Research, and Wendy Fields, Democracy Institute, moderated by our power player, Krista Jones, Vote, Run, Lead. At 7 p.m., we also have an exciting panel discussion, Raising Rural Voices, 7 p.m., with elected officials Chris Hurst and Wendy Godides, advocates V. Fry, Sister Simone from Network Lobby, moderator Lindsay Davis Stover. And the purpose of the conversation is to raise the profile of Democratic voices in rural communities and come together to make Democrats competitive in every race throughout Virginia.
Yes,
so
and remember that on that rural, we'll have the rural voices. We have Jennifer Woofter, and we will have Lindley, what's Lindley's last name? And Ian, we have some different people in that. Oh, and Christian Worth will be in the rural panel too. But Ian McNally and Lindley, I'm blanking on Lindley's last name, but they also will be starting that panel tomorrow. Yep. Yes, thank you.
So the recap of the summit will be sent to you shortly, and the videos will go up on Network Nova's YouTube channel, which is networknova.org/watch, networknova.org/watch. And also, please don't forget to take a look at the Badass Boutique, networknova.org/shop, networknova.org/shop. Plenty of things there for everyone: postcards, t-shirts, caps, mugs, and masks. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and take care, stay safe, stay strong, stay together. Winning is the only option.
Yes, thank you. And
we'd like
to sponsors again, and thank you.
Yes.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Stair. Thank you, everybody in the room. We'll see you tomorrow. Awesome. Woo!
Let me thank this. Okay. So I wanted to thank the sponsors with the slide.
Who is that?
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.